covering the butterfly guard passing, and I'm just going to give you guys some context. So as you guys are aware, we've been looking at the over-under position, we've been looking at entering the over-under, and then using like the over-under almost like a snatch pass to finish the pass. Then we also looked at the option of chopping the hand across to go for the stack pass as well. So just to quickly go through it again. So we're pinning the leg down, going for our over-under, using almost like a snatch pass style to finish the over-under. Then we looked at what happens when we're attacking our over-under and our head gets pushed the wrong way. And we're going to our single under stack pass finish. So what we're just going to look at now is a common sequence that I've been referencing when we're kind of working through the over-under. Usually when my other leg is stepped over the top and I'm starting to press through with the over-under pass, my opponent decides to try and lock his half guard. And so one thing to note here is it should be hard for your opponent to lock the half guard if your hips are quite low on the knee and your chest is kind of on top of the the middle section of the thigh, if that makes sense. So if I'm quite low like this, my opponent tries to lock his half guard, it's very hard. But if I start to bring the line of my hips really over his knee like this, then he's likely going to lock his half guard. Now this is a very unfair half guard for him on bottom because he's now committing, he's basically giving me the knee line of this leg. So if I take my hand out and hug over the top, I'm now in a flattened out half. So we've covered our very basic finishes in regards to passing the flattened out half guard. I'm just going to quickly go over them right now. So one thing that is really important is I want to have my right knee really close to this far hip. And the reason why is because if there is space between my right knee or my leg that's inside the half guard and this far hip, it's going to be very easy for him to actually put in a butterfly hook. Okay, whereas sorry, can you guys see this butterfly hook that's in here? You guys should probably come around to this side. So we obviously want to avoid this because once he gets this inside position, now he can actually start to recover his guard. He can actually start to elevate us and get under us as well. So if we look at a position where my knee is really flared out and my knee is almost attaching to this far hip, now if he tries to put that butterfly hook in, it should be quite hard. And I'm always kind of walking my knee up. So if he's starting to hip escape outwards, to try and put that hook in, see how I'm following? Good. You should always be able to follow your opponent. Because of the over-under entry, I actually have a near side underhook. So here, this hand here becomes an underhook. So when he locks the half guard, you basically have two low underhooks, near side and a far side. Usually what I like to do if I have the near side underhook is I'm going to think about passing to 3/4 mount. If I don't have the near side underhook, of course I can still pass the 3/4 mount, but this is where we're going to be using our very basic half guard passes, where we can go for 3/4 mount or we can go for cross. So now we're going to be looking at the instance where we don't do a good job of really crowding the hips once we flatten out our opponent and they manage to stick this butterfly hook in. Go over under. He's managed to lock his half guard because I was too high, so I throw my arm over the top. And as I start to settle into the half guard, I've forgotten to follow his far hip with this leg. So now he puts in this butterfly hook. So now we're just going to look at how we can actually address this butterfly hook. Really important thing we're going to look at is essentially a body lock pass. Because we've got two low underhooks, it's essentially a body lock pass, especially in the gi. When you can make grips on the gi here, this is almost the same thing as having your hands connect. What I really want to focus on is this underhook here. I'm going to grab the material of the jacket. I could grab the belt, or I could grab the drawstring. For this particular style of pass, I actually want to go thumb inside the drawstring, like this. Now, the next thing that we have to be thinking of is our head position. So, if my head is on this same side, it's potentially easier for my opponent to sweep me. Okay, because as I start to get hook swept, what you'll notice here is, if we pause about here, I'm starting to have my shoulder, this right shoulder, kind of rotate up towards the ceiling. The more this shoulder rotates, and it's not the shoulder, it's more so the trunk, the more my trunk rotates, this is actually how I get swept. So keeping my head on this side is not ideal. I do see people that can successfully body lock by keeping their head on this side, but I would say in regards to keeping a safe base, we actually want to have a head to the other side, like this. Now the next thing that is going to happen is my opponent is always going to turn his hips towards me. Now you don't have to be upward, just turn more on. Now, once we're here, this is usually where my opponent is going to still look to try and sweep me a little bit. So if he cups my tricep with his right hand, and he starts to elevate me up like this, see how he can start to eventually sweep me all the way over the top.
So he's cupped your tricep?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my opponent, the tricep grip, they're pretty much always going to be able to grab this arm. Okay, so you're both kind of accepting the fact that you're going to have grips on each other in this position. One thing that we can change though, and this is something that I find really helped me with the butterfly guard style passing and body lock passing, is where we can actually allow them to attach this hook. So right now, if I keep my hip kind of flaring out like this, if I'm quite complacent with the positioning of this leg, his hook is always going to be on my hamstring. And if his hook always attaches to my hamstring and inner thigh, it means that he's always going to be able to lift this leg off the floor, like this. And notice how the more he starts to lift this leg off the floor, the more I start to get that rotation at my trunk. So instead of letting that hook attach to our hamstring, what we're actually going to focus on is we're actually going to focus on turning our knee kind of downwards towards the mat. And it's not to get our knee to the mat, it's actually so that instead of them hooking our hamstring, I actually want their butterfly hook to be on the front of our thigh, so like our quad. So everyone right now, just focus on what I'm doing with this leg. So right now, his hook's on the inner aspect of my thigh. I'm going to start to turn my knee down as I turn my hips down. What you should notice here is that his hook is on my quad now. So now if you try and sweep me now, so you can potentially lift my leg. I'll make my leg a bit lighter. But what can actually happen here is because you don't have the hook on the inside of the thigh, it's actually a very weak hook. You don't have the best purchase here, an attachment with this hook. So you can actually start to kind of slip off the hook and fall down. So just by switching the contact of this hook from my hamstring to my quad, you guys should see that the hook is not going to attach as well, and I can actually make my leg a lot heavier, if that makes sense. So now, thinking of this concept right here, always switching the head over to the other side, I want you guys to really think of turning your, rotating your hip so that you feel their hook, instead of attaching to your inner thigh, their hook should be attaching to the top of your thigh and your quad. Just so you guys can get a hang of it, so we're not going to go into the pass just yet. What I want you guys to do is, for the person on top, to basically go into the position, let your partner get a butterfly hook, and then I want you to start to take their hook from the inside of your thigh to the front of your thigh. Okay, and then I want your partner to try and butterfly hook sweep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I know that my partner is going to do a good job, is doing a good job if when I go to sweep him, so really start to like turn your, like this. So it's kind of like we're sprawling. But I know that my partner is doing a good job because one, I will feel the hook start to feel a lot heavier, and I don't feel like I can actually stay attached with the hook. But two, when I try and sweep, it should be very, very hard for me to move my opponent. But if he's not doing it correct, if he lets me attach the hook to the inner thigh, you should be able to kind of feel this with your own foot, but also you'll start to be able to lift their foot off the floor as well. Alright, so just give this a quick go, get a feel for, like, I guess the pressure of this technique, and then we're going to look at how we can actually set up the pass. 2, 3. So I'm just going to repeat like the initial sequence to tie it back with the over-under. Half guard, cover the knee line, settle in a flatter half guard, but I haven't chased his hip. So he scoots out and puts his butterfly hook in. The moment we get there, I really close the elbow of the underhook of the same side as his butterfly hook, and I bring my head to this side. Now, I don't like to be on my knees. I find that it's harder for me to base here, so I like to step this thing out. So I've got one knee up and one knee down. Now, as he starts to turn in, and he starts to set his hook for the butterfly hook swing, the first thing I'm going to look at doing is clearing the hook. Sorry, not clearing the hook, but making his hook weaker by using that detail I showed you earlier, where we're turning hips towards the mat, and especially the butterfly, the leg that has the butterfly hook attached to it, we're turning it, really exaggerating turning it downwards so that we feel his foot on the front of our quad as opposed to the inside of our hamstring. Now, I'm trying to really sprawl my hips down towards the mat here. Okay, and so what will happen is your opponent is really going to commit to trying to stick the hook. So usually we're here. I turn everything to this side. Now my opponent's going to try and swing. I'm going to make my leg heavy as I sprawl my hips down towards the mat. Once I get to the sprawled position, I ideally want to grab my own tricep grip. So my hips are very low. Okay, my hips are actually way lower than his hips. And his hook, I can kind of feel his hook slightly attached to me. But his hook is pretty much like dead. Okay, so I've pretty much killed the hook here. So a few things are going to happen here, and it's pretty much based off your opponent's reaction. So we've cleared the butterfly hook. I can do a few things. I can try and sprawl my hip down towards the mat. I would say this should be your main goal, is trying to sprawl this hip down towards the mat. And the reason why this is so strong is because the lower my hips are to the floor, the harder it is for my opponent to actually refeed the butterfly hook. And if my opponent makes the mistake of having too much tunnel vision with the butterfly hook, I can actually start to walk into side control. So usually what's going to happen is once I've sprawled and I'm clearing the hook by trying to get my hip bone down towards the floor, usually what's going to happen here is my opponent is going to try and pull me into either a half guard, like so, or he might try and opt for going with his bottom leg, his bottom shin going across my waist. And then he's going to try and like attach to like a closed guard, or potentially he's going to try and attach his butterfly hook in if I happen to feel him going back to the closed guard. So what I mean by this is if I start to feel him really really win the battle in regards to coming back to closed guard, I'm going to get a bend in my hip, and this is where he can actually reinsert his butterfly hook. Does that make sense? So we're just going to look at a few sequences from here. The first thing I want you guys to look at, I guess I'm going to get you guys drilling two of these sequences. The first thing is clearing the hook and then just walking all the way up into side control. I'm really focusing on connecting initially it's my ribs, and then it's my hips, and then it's my knee. Really focusing on getting those 3 points of connection in order for this like very basic butterfly guard pass. So I'm just going to go through it with you guys again. So once I start to feel my opponent trying to sweep me, keep trying to sweep me here. Once I start to clear the hook, I'm grabbing my own tricep. I'm starting to walk really close towards the floor and then up towards the other option that's going to happen is once you've sprawled and you're starting to walk up and progress through the pass, your opponent is going to accept a half guard, like this. All I like to do from here is I like to just take my head to the other side and cover this down. Now we're back in this half guard position. Just make sure that your right knee is really covering the far hip, otherwise you're going to get put in butterfly guard again. Does that make sense? So full sequence. Step to sweep. Or half guard. Any questions so far, guys? All right, so let's just focus on these two. 2, 3. This is something really important to think of, especially when we're drilling like butterfly guard passes, especially body lock passes, is the direction the guard player's hips are facing and also the direction your head is in. So I've already kind of spoken about where we need to put our head, but for the person on bottom, it's really important if from this like half butterfly position, it's actually really important for the person on bottom so that the person on top can actually understand how the pass should feel to actually turn their hips towards them. Okay, because I'm seeing a lot of people kind of just laying flat on their back. If you're flat on your back, you can't do a butterfly hook sweep. Okay? If we're on our side, especially if we're facing towards the side we're trying to sweep, this is actually how we can actually use a butterfly hook sweep. Now, similar to the guard retention stuff, whenever, let's say you're standing, whenever I'm dealing with a standing opponent and disengaged or engaged, whatever the situation, my pelvis is always facing towards my opponent. Now, if we're in butterfly, it's the exact same thing. I always have to have my pelvis facing towards my opponent so that I can actually start to hit my sweeps. Come back on top. If my hips face the other way, if I've got a butterfly guard but my hips are facing this way, this is basically a smash pass. What my opponent needs to do now is, I've already walked my legs to the side. All he needs to do is just kick over into side control. So there's a huge difference between this is basically an end stage smash pass, versus this. Okay? In this scenario, this is where we're using the sprawl. So I'm going to try and use the sweep, sprawl, clears my hook. All I can really do is come back to a half guard. All right, guys, 2, 3. This series is going to be split up into 3 separate instructionals. The first part is going to be on upper body guards, the second part is going to be on lower body guards, and then the third part is going to be the hybrid guards of the upper and lower body. For this instructional that is soon to be released, part 1, which is upper body guards, we're solely looking into the main, most high percentage upper body guards in the gi. So this is going to include our double sleeve guard, our collar sleeve guard, our lasso guard variations, as well as our collar sleeve variations, whether it's a cross collar or a straight collar grip. I've structured this instructional to be very user-friendly and easily digestible for the viewer. My goal for this instructional is to give you guys a sound understanding
of all the small little battles that you have to win in order to maintain your guard, off balance from your guard, and obviously successfully attack from your guard. Conversely, I also want to give you guys a sound understanding of what your opponent is trying to do when they're inside your guard, trying to shut down your guard and dismantle your guard. Overall, if you can grasp these ideas, then you'll be able to actually have a sound understanding of how to play open guard in the game. This instructional will be available at BJJ Fanatics, so if you're interested in purchasing a copy for yourself, make sure to head over to their website.